The following video is based upon true crime content. Therefore, it may contain images and/or language that some find disturbing. For this reason, viewer discretion is advised. Hi, everyone. I just came across something I need to talk about. Every day I get alerts on what's going on with the different cases that we follow, and I get a lot on the Crumbley case, and much of it is repetitive, but one particular item came up here today that I do want to talk about. First of all, I want to remind everybody about how the prosecution in the Jennifer and James Crumbley case, and if you remember, they're both connected to the Oxford High School tragedy. Those prosecutors was it Hulu or Netflix? Why do I think it's Hulu? Anyway, of course, they did their little documentary. It was not a good documentary. I've gotten to the point to where I just don't like them. And I'm not saying that Jennifer and James Crumbley are innocent. I'm definitely not saying that Ethan Crumbley was innocent. What I don't like is shady prosecutors. Okay, here's the article that I want to discuss. This came out in the Detroit Free Press, and it was published on the 13th. And it's written by Tressa Baldus. So she said that the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office spent at least $100,000 on two high-priced public relations firms to run a smear campaign against the Oxford High School shooter's parents. They cut a secret deal with the ABC despite the judge's gag order and another national reporter to embed him into its war room and document trial strategy sessions, according to a new defense court filing. And that's what I'm talking about. They were in the room. Hulu was documenting them while the trial was going on. How can them spending money on a PR firm be legal? It's one thing to spend money on a PR firm for them. I'm not even saying that's right, but to spend it on someone who has been accused of a crime, but if they're supposed to follow the letter of the law, has not yet been convicted. How can this be legal, guys? All right, let's keep reading. And yes, this is the main one right here. It says the prosecution did all this, according to the defense, because it knew from the get-go that the law wasn't on its side. So it launched a campaign to convince the public that the unprecedented charges against James and Jennifer Crumbley were warranted. Now, first of all, I want to say, before anybody jumps on me, I'm not saying that Jennifer and James Crumbley did not do something wrong here, okay? I don't agree with what they did. So I'm just reading this because I think that the prosecution has overstepped big time. They've done more than overstep at this point. What the prosecution's case lacks in the law, they have attempted to make up for in the court of public opinion. Absolutely right. Desi is representing the Ethan's mother, Jennifer Crumbley, who is trying to get her involuntary manslaughter conviction overturned or a new trial, and she also wants to be released from prison pending her appeal. Jennifer Crumbley's attorney alleges the prosecution engaged in abuses of all sorts in building its historic case, include cutting secret deals with key school staff witnesses who were assured their statements to investigators would not be held against him. Okay, if you're not familiar, you've got the dean of students and you've got the school counselor. Both were in a meeting with the mom and dad and Ethan prior to all this happening. In fact, the school counselor was the one who brought all this to his attention, everyone's attention. The school board is on fire with everybody pointing the finger at them because they should have done something. According to the school counselor, he didn't have the authority not to let Ethan back in class, but the dean of students did. But according to what they say, they did cut a deal with both of these people that if they testified against Jennifer and James, they wouldn't be prosecuted. There's all kinds of lawsuits going on about the different victims and their parents going after all of these different people, including the dean of students, the school board, and the school counselor. Those deals, known as proffer agreements, were discovered and disclosed by the Free Press in April, just days after Ethan's father, James Crumbley, also was convicted of involuntary manslaughter for the deaths of the 4 Oxford High School students killed by their son. The victims were Hannah St. Juliana, 14 years old, Tate Meyer, 16 years old, Madison Baldwin, 17 years old, and Justin Schilling, 17 years old. 7 others, including a teacher, also were injured in the November 30th, 2021 mass shooting. According to Desi's filing, the 2 public relation firms hired by the prosecutor's office are Moment Strategies, which is owned by former Detroit journalist Alexis Wiley, and a national crisis response company called Identity. This is going to break, and when it does, this is huge. This is huge. This is the Desi. I think I'm saying his name right. He's the new attorney for Jennifer Crumbley. According to Desi's filings, the 2 public relations firms were hired by the prosecutor's office. In the hours following the incident, Identity was retained by the prosecution to manage and coordinate the media, and also to shape positioning on the tragedy, crafting statements and messaging. Identity states on its website, noting that it also helped coordinate 40 one-on-one interviews in 1 week with national media outlets. Weeks after the shooting, the prosecution also spent $100,000 in taxpayer money to retain Moment Strategies, LLC, whose stated goal was to implement a national communication strategy and to provide crisis communication to each group of key stakeholders. According to Wiley, this $100,000 was for work her firm performed over 2.5 years on the Crumbley cases. All right. I see this and I think of all the money that Waukesha spent on making sure that the victims were okay, on taking care of the people in their community, to do everything they could for the people in their community to not suffer any more than they already had after the Darrell Brooks Waukesha Parade drive-through. You compare that to this, and you look at how this prosecution has reacted compared to Sue Opper's prosecution, they're like night and day. This can't be legal. This can't be legal. It was amazing what they did for their community. And then you see this. Of course, we're talking about Detroit versus a little town called Waukesha, you know? They did a phone interview with Wiley, and this is what he said. Look, the fact is, when their son came to them asking for help, they didn't get him help. They went out and bought him a gun. And no amount of PR can do anything in that situation. There was no smear campaign. There were just facts. Now remember, Wiley works for Moment Strategies, LLC, so she's trying to protect her client. The Crumbleys, however, have maintained their son never came to them for help with mental health issues. That's a whole nother story. I don't agree with that. And they never saw any signs of him mentally struggling other than typical high school anxiety over classes. That's crap. They weren't paying attention as parents. Again, not the point here. The shooter also has stated that the shooting wasn't his parents' fault, though he did write in a journal, "I have fully mentally lost it after years of fighting my dark side. My parents won't listen to me about help or a therapist." True. Very true. The journal was used as evidence at trial, though Ethan refused to testify in his parents' case and therefore could not be questioned about what he wrote in the journal. So when Jennifer and James were on trial, Ethan's attorney refused to let him come in and testify on anyone's side, which the defense attorneys had a hard time with. This is another sticking point on appeal, that the journal should have never been entered as evidence because the writer could not be cross-examined. That's a good point. You either bring it in or you don't bring it in. I don't want to say anything negative about that judge. She was very relaxed. throughout the whole thing. I don't know. I don't know what my thoughts were on her. I thought she made some good points on both sides, I guess. First, we uncover secret deals with key witnesses, and now we learn the same prosecution paid for a smear campaign, completely ignoring judicial instruction. Jennifer's attorney says, "I'm flabbergasted." The court made it very clear that both the prosecution and the defense were prohibited from engaging with media in any way that would encourage pre-trial publicity. Which, if you think about it, you guys, that's all we saw before that trial. I mean, that's why I picked it up and started following it, because there was so much coming up about it constantly in the media that I was like, I really need to follow this. I probably would have pushed it by the wayside if it hadn't been out there the way it was. But it was all out there the way it was because of the prosecution. Still, Crumbley's attorney, Jennifer's Crumbley's attorney, alleges the prosecution ignored that order, and they brokered contracts with 2 national media outlets, including ABC News, which I think is Hulu, which produced a documentary, called about the Crumbleys, called Sins of the Parents, that aired on Hulu 9 days after James Crumbley was convicted. The documentary included interviews with prosecutors in their homes and offices where they discussed the case with reporters, despite there being a gag order. Jennifer and James Crumbley were tried and convicted in separate trials. That documentary was horrible. It was one-sided. I didn't watch it. Well, no, I started to watch it, but by the time I had sat through Jennifer and James's trials and listened to the prosecution and the way that they were, I couldn't stomach it. Okay, moving on. When the Hulu documentary aired, the Free Press contacted Oakland County Circuit Judge Cheryl Matthews' office to find out whether the judge knew about it before it aired. A court staffer said that the judge learned about it when the public did, which was when it aired. Judge Matthews, who oversaw the trial and issued the gag order, declined request for comment. And I think that's probably what a good judge would do. That's not to say she's not going to do something more here. Also at issue for Crumbley's attorney is a contract that the prosecutor's office brokered with a Washington Post reporter who also had inside access to the prosecutor's office before and during trial, and even sat in on trial strategy sessions when the prosecutors discussed how they would present certain evidence and what questions would be asked of certain witnesses. In a statement Monday, the Chief Assistant Oakland County Prosecutor David Williams denied any wrongdoing by the prosecutor's office, noting the Hulu documentary and Washington Post article cited by the defense were published after the trials ended, not before. Doesn't matter. That's still crap. And the suggestion that they had any impact on the jury is ridiculous. He also defended the prosecution's hiring of a PR firm, or PR firms, plural, to assist with all the interest in this monumental case. The Oxford High School shooting drew immediate national and international attention. False rumors began spreading quickly. Schools across Michigan and across the country were closed because of false threats, Williams stated. The Oakland County Executive and the Oakland County Board of Commissioners immediately provided the resources needed to get reliable information to the public and the media. We owed that to the victims and the public. I want to hear what the victims have to say about this. Williams continued to say that Jennifer Crumbley was convicted for what she did and didn't do, and the defense cannot change those facts. She was convicted on the facts, not a media narrative. Oh, but come on now. We know this, but if they let this go, think about it. If Detroit is going to be a laughingstock. If somebody, the Supreme Court, whoever, if they don't get involved in this and do something about this, make some kind of judgment, have a trial, do something to address what this right here that's been done in this article, it's going to be scandalous. It's already scandalous. Now, Jennifer's attorney says He disagrees, maintaining that the prosecution crossed legal and ethical lines to convince the public that it had a strong case against Jennifer Crumbley when it knew otherwise. Specifically, he argues, the prosecution has tried to argue that Crumbley had a legal duty to protect the Oxford students when, he maintains, no such legal duty exists. Much like a person who fails to stop a robbery or prevent a person from jumping in front of a train cannot be charged with a crime. I think he's stretching that a little bit. I mean, it was her son. And I want to just jump in right here and say something. For those of you guys who are not familiar with this case, there was evidence that Jennifer and James Crumbley ignored their child's plea for help. That's why I guess this case became so important to me, because I felt like you have a troubled child because of the way he was brought up. So you created that. And now when he's reaching out to you saying, no, I'm serious, I really need help, or I need attention, or I need whatever, they ignore it. It's almost like they were, you think about it, was almost like they were young teenagers raising a child, is the way I look at it. She was off having an affair. I think he was, I don't know, I don't remember his stance on it. It was just really odd. They just didn't seem like hands-on parents. I'm not saying they didn't love him. I'm not saying they didn't spend time with him. I just think there was some underlying issues there that nobody wanted to look at. The elephant in the room, so to speak. Does that mean that every parent out there whose child goes and does something like this, is it their fault? I don't think so. I think it does require them look into what was done and what wasn't done. I agree with that part. I'm getting into a whole nother topic that I don't want to get into because I don't want to piss people off, but I've never been a victim of a shooting. But there's a reason why the parents in the past have not been charged with these crimes. Okay, I'm just going to say it like that. Okay, so her attorney continues to speak. And he says, on this point, it is worth repeating that there is no binding precedence in Michigan from which to find that Mrs. Crumbley owed any legal duty to protect the victims or the public at large from the intentional criminal acts of her son. In truth, the prosecution is asking the court to recognize for the first time ever a new duty imposed on a mother. Simply stated, the prosecution is advancing a new policy argument never before recognized by our courts. And what the prosecution's case lacks in the law, they have attempted to make up for in the court of public opinion. Now, just to say something really quick, why isn't James' attorney jumping on this bandwagon? I have a feeling that whatever happens with Jennifer is going to help out with James as well. So I kind of feel like, I wonder what's going on there behind the scenes. Now, it's good to note here that all of the Crumbleys, including Ethan, are appealing their trials. The prosecution, meanwhile, maintains that Jennifer Crumbley was convicted fair and square and needs to stay in prison for failing to control her son and prevent him from harming others. The prosecution's longstanding theme in this case has been that the Crumbleys ignored a son who was mentally spiraling, and instead of getting him medical help, they bought him a gun. That's a fact you can't get around, you guys. Jennifer Crumbley received a fair trial and was unanimously convicted by a jury of her peers. We have asked the judge to deny her motions and allow her to continue serving her prison sentence. We will continue to fight for justice for Hannah, Madison, Tate, and Justin, for their families, and for our entire community, said the Oakland County prosecutor, Karen McDonald. Miss McDonald. Like when we watched the Waukesha case, and I know I keep going back to this, but this is just, Waukesha was amazing, you guys. There's just, if you haven't watched that case, get past Daryl Brooks and all his stupidity. If you haven't watched how Waukesha handled their community, how they helped each other, how everybody in that community pulled together to assist one another, it's amazing. An amazing community. Never once did they post victim stuff up and try to use it in a way to grandstand. I mean, the cases are night and day, but just they're grandstanding. And they're grandstanding with these kids pictures behind them. And I just don't. As for the defense's claims that the prosecution cut secret deals with 2 witnesses and wrongfully withheld those agreements from the defense, McDonald has said the 2 proffer agreements the defendant complains of were not favorable to the defense, were not relevant, and were not required to be produced. The 2 witnesses were not granted immunity, and they were made no promises of favorable consideration. Now, see, I've heard otherwise. I've heard that there's proof out there that they were promised that they weren't going to go after them. This is going to turn into something big. They're going to investigate these prosecutors. They have to at this point. Now, McDonald also disagrees with Crumbley's attorney on the no legal duty argument, maintaining Crumbley owed a legal duty to the students of Oxford High School on November 30th of 2021, and the jury unanimously concluded that her own actions and inactions were a cause of the deaths. That's true. Look, when you go back to it, they had a meeting with the son. The day of the incident, Ethan was called to the counselor's office because of some things that he wrote, a teacher found. And they brought him in, and they talked to him, and then they called his parents, and his parents came over and sat in with him. The unfortunate thing was that it was a 10-minute meeting. It literally didn't last more than 15 minutes, I don't think. They were out of there within 15 minutes. Now, the big problem was that the whole time that they're in this meeting, Ethan had the weapon in his backpack right there in the counselor's office. Now, also in this meeting was the dean of students. He was the one with the authority to tell the parents, we can't send Ethan back to class. The counselor claims he did not have that authority. Now, I think the counselor made a recommendation that maybe he shouldn't go back to class. But mom and dad were like, well, it seemed like they had worked at everything else. They didn't have time for it. Again, I'm not saying that Jennifer and James Crumbley were parents of the year, okay, guys? But nobody checked that kid's backpack. But also, in the defense of the school counselor and the dean of students, they did not know that Ethan owned a weapon. They did not know that Ethan had been given a weapon for Christmas by his parents. It was an early Christmas present. So there was 3 people in that counselor's office that knew he had access to a weapon. Mom, Dad, and Ethan. And neither Mom nor Dad checked his backpack. But you know what Dad did do? As soon as things got riled up, he goes home to check to see if the weapon was where it was supposed to be. I don't know if this is going to get the attention that it deserves. These shady acts. Okay, so the prosecutor says that the mom still refuses to take responsibility. So in his efforts to get the conviction reversed, Jennifer's attorney also criticizes the prosecution for, as he views it, pushing 2 conflicting theories. Specifically, the prosecution accused the mother of failing to control her minor child, yet Ethan was charged, convicted, and sentenced as an adult. Not a minor. And that is a conflict. I mean, it is weird. It is weird, you guys. He said the prosecution can't have it both ways. Of course, the prosecution disagrees. And McDonald comes in and says, the fact that her son was charged as an adult does not help her. He was charged as an adult because he committed the most serious offense known to the law, first-degree red rum. The fact that her own conduct led to 4 homicides is an aggravating factor, not a mitigating one. She said Jennifer Crumbley's attempt to blame her son for her own actions and inactions is not only legally flawed, it reflects her continued refusal to take responsibility for her conduct. So what I see going on here, what I see McDonald's doing here, is saying, it doesn't matter what you say, we did all this. The fact is, they were still guilty. Had they been innocent, would it make a difference what they did wrong here? What the team did with hiring a PR firm? You damn right it would be. It doesn't matter. In this case, it doesn't matter who's guilty and who's innocent. The fact is, the prosecution has done something that is shady as hell. And what do the taxpayers think about this? So Jennifer Crumbley asked for the 7th time to be released from prison. So they want her to be released pending her appeal, which, I mean, who, has that ever happened? Has anybody ever heard of somebody that's been convicted of a crime? They're like, oh, okay, we're going to give you a do-over. This isn't golf. You don't get a mulligan. Like, we're going to give you a do-over. So, yeah, you can just stay home till we do it. Yeah, just stay home. Yeah, that's fine. What? See, her defense is saying she's not a threat to anyone, nor a flight risk. Well, I agree. She's probably not a threat to anyone, but a flight risk? See, after all this happened, you guys, if you're not familiar, Jennifer and James Crumbley went off and literally hid from authorities. They claimed they were hiding from the public and everybody else, the media, all that. And it could have been that they were getting a lot of heat from the media. I could see where you want privacy, but the way they hid was really sketchy. I mean, they were hiding like in a office building / warehouse building, sleeping there at night. It was just really strange. It's not like we're going to go over and stay at a friend's house to get away from everything. It was very weird. And of course, that's where they were found. It's not like they turned themselves in. They had said they were going to turn themselves in, but the police found them at this place, at this warehouse, and they tactical came in and took them down and arrested them. It's all on video. And if you have not watched this case, I've got it all on my channel under the Oxford School tragedy. I think that's what I've got it under. It's under Crumbleys playlist in my thing. Crumbley's attorney wants a GPS monitor put on her to assure the court that she will appear at future proceedings. And he continues to say that she's been wrongfully detained for a crime he maintains she did not commit. Well, he can't really say that because she was found guilty in a court of law by a jury. So, I don't know. This is a little bit strange. Now, is there another judge that's going to be looking at the... I want to know. Y'all, we're going to have to go watch one of these lawyers. Maybe we'll have to go watch the lawyer and see what he says about all this. The prosecution disagrees and has urged the judge to keep her locked up. This is at least the 7th time bond has been addressed during these proceedings. The only difference now is that the presumption of innocence no longer applies. The defendant has been convicted by a jury of her peers. This is McDonald saying that. She also said, Crumbley cannot be trusted not to flee, especially given the parents' actions following the shooting. So this is what they say they did after the shooting. They liquidated their assets. They emptied their son's bank account, abandoned a vehicle, bought burner phones, and traveled 30 to 40 miles to hide in a commercial building in Detroit. They attempted to obscure the view of their license plates when they parked their cars outside the buildings by backing in. That's true. After a 911 caller tipped off the authorities, the fugitive apprehension team entered the building to effectuate an arrest. They were found because there was someone in the building that saw them who had a unit there, and he thought it was suspicious, and he saw their car, and he checked because he was watching the news, and he knew who they were, and he called in and reported them. He was actually a witness in their trial. Despite the overwhelming police presence, the massive flashlights, and the sound of doors being broken down, the defendants did not surrender themselves, but pretended to be asleep. Their deceit was laid bare when their text messages from the defendants came to light, showing that they suspected that they had been found and were laying low. The fugitive apprehension team had to go through the entire building, room by room, and find defendants hiding in a corner of one of the rooms with one of the burner phones smashed. Lawyers for the Crumbleys have long argued that the couple was never trying to flee, but rather took refuge in a friend's art studio in Detroit because they were getting death threats and were scared. The couple also had retained private lawyers when they were taking cover in the art studio, and they had planned to turn themselves in the following morning in court. In their defense, I will say their lawyers were communicating with the police at that point. Now, her attorney goes on to say, Mrs. Crumbley has committed no crime, has never harmed anyone, and is certainly not a flight risk. So there is no reason to deny her right to freedom while an overreaching prosecution attempts to pin the failings of a nation on the back of parents. They are using them as an example of what could happen. I always felt like that was why it was getting so much press. Apparently not. I don't know. I feel like her attorney's not saying the right things here because it's not going to help her case any. You can't sit here and argue the fact that she was already convicted. You can't argue that. But I guess what he's trying to say is the whole conviction was BS because of the PR. Her attorney has also scoffed at the prosecution's claims that it did not have to turn over the agreements with 2 witnesses over to the defense because, as they held, no immunity was ever granted. See, I think that's the key right there. That whole piece right there is the piece that's going to unravel the case because you got 2 other people involved that are going to say, well, I don't know. Now, Jennifer's attorney disagrees, alleging that the agreements did protect the witnesses from liability over their own controversial actions on the day of the shooting, including not searching the shooter's backpack and allowing the shooter to return to class despite receiving multiple warnings about the boy. He had researched bullets in class, watched a video of someone gunning down people, and he drew a disturbing picture of a gun, a human body bleeding, and the words, "The thoughts won't stop, help me." I'm sorry, but what he just said there could also be held against the parents as well as the school. Okay, but let's continue what he said. The prosecution's assertion is easily disproved by the plain language of the proffer agreement. In fact, the expressly stated purpose of the proffer agreement was to receive truthful information from your client, including information about possible criminal activity by your client. Ezzy, Jennifer's attorney, argues in his latest court filing, stressing one paragraph of the agreements expressly prohibits the prosecution from using any proffer statement made by you or your client in this office's case in chief in any criminal prosecution of your client. In other words, the agreements did convey limited use immunity for any statements made during interviews with investigators. No matter how hard the prosecution tries to assert otherwise, it is beyond dispute that the plain terms of the proffer agreement in this case did in fact convey limited use immunity. The prosecution did in fact enter into agreement with these witnesses whereby their proffer statements could not be used against them in a possible criminal prosecution. This is use immunity, plain and simple. He also stressed it should be highlighted that the prosecution's suppression of the proffer agreements was neither accidental nor an oversight. Rather, it was intentional. You go, Tressa, from Detroit Free Press. You get that crap out there, girl. Oh my goodness, the scandal. You guys, this is not going away. I had thought it was. I didn't think, when I saw all that stuff coming up about her getting a new attorney, I thought, well, this is just a new appellate attorney or whatever, but I didn't realize this guy was going all in. And it really does. It sets the precedence for other areas. But with all this other stuff around it, it's going to be hard to use this case to set precedents now, in my opinion. I don't know. I'm not an attorney, but we are going to stay on top of this. We want to follow this. This is coming back into court, you guys. It's going to be back on court TV, and we're going to be watching it when it does. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this as much as I have, learning about this. I don't know if you're as freaked out about it as I am, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about it in the comments below. So drop it like it's hot, guys. Have a blessed day, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like and subscribe on your way out, and feel free to leave a comment. Have a blessed day.